is not completely controlling you, then you look at that and you say, that's quite the responsibility that they're voluntarily giving me. And I know there's pastors out there that's like, well, let's do like conversational learning. Let's do like dialogical learning. Let's do small groups. Let's like converse more and get more participation. It's like, well, some of those people don't want participation. They actually want to come to church and they want you to tell them what to think.
Yeah.
And they're never going to like think for themselves. And I've had experiences where I tried to force people to think for themselves and they were like resisted it like they were squirrels in a corner. And I was like, just tell me. So people give you this awesome responsibility, and that changes the way that I think about preaching, which isn't didactic. And if anything, it's open. And that has its own dangers. Mm-hmm. But even if I was didactic, people would still project their own stuff on it.
Sure.
So it's like, and somebody posted the other day, and ironically, it was like a super conservative person, but I was grateful for the post because they talked about how Jesus preached and how Jesus taught. And nobody knew what that guy was talking about.
I mean, he even says he intentionally...
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm purposely making it confusing.
And it's the same way like the Asian guys on the top of the mountain, the cliche, the trope where Homer Simpson goes to the top of the mountain to like figure out like what's the meaning of life, and like
43,
and that's making fun of it. But what it's making fun of is a lot of times like people, full circle, people who have a more mystical bent, like just don't have the patience. They've done the stuff, don't have the patience for you asking like, what's the meaning of life? Should I get a higher mortgage?
Right.
And you're just like, no, the answer is you should be at peace with your wife. And they're like, that doesn't help me. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Right.
Go read a book.
Right. Which I also think full circle goes back to what I'm seeing as like this new fundamentalism where they're very much black and white, would read the Bible like I would, as like it claiming to be history, especially when I was a Christian, making these factual claims about predestination, about the dangers of evil, about, this and that. And you saying like, no, like there's a different way. And so the way you don't get sucked into fundamentalism, at least what I partially am taking away, is like, you just have to be less black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And mysticism is a way to be less black and white, yet still hold on to tradition and faith and,
Yeah. It's a bit manipulative because you could also go as far to the other side as you wanted. You could be as like anti-orthodox or unorthodox as you want and still claim orthodoxy. You could be like, yeah, I believe in the resurrection and I believe the Bible is true. I just mean completely different things than you mean when I say that.
Right.
But you don't understand how deep I am. So
right. Which I think is like
go there.
The argument against McLaren's book, Generous Orthodoxy. Right.
Right.
Like it's too generous. Like it all of a sudden, terms have to have a definition that everyone agrees upon or they're meaningless.
Right.
Right. I think there was like 18 rabbit trails of a conversation, and hopefully it was fruitful for somebody. I don't know if you have anything else you want to wrap up with, close up with.
I'm still reeling from your. I think you should write a paper or something on this theory. Yeah, this new fundamentalism, because I think that I have not thought about it in those terms you put it in. Although like there's some intersectionality in the ways that we're thinking. And then when I started talking about fundamentalism, I realized now that I was really talking about what you would call the old fundamentalism. So what I think you're really talking about is something that's reactionary, to something really current.
Yeah, although I would say
that we're still in the midst of.
Yeah,
and I've often wondered, and maybe this is what you were getting at. Are these people who haven't come to terms with the fact that they're nihilists who lost their faith? Maybe that's the next podcast. Yeah, that's like a big statement.
So you're saying these reformed evangelical seminarians are, in fact, nihilists who lost their faith? They just don't know it.
Maybe something like that. Like,
because their object of their faith, just to go back to sort of Christian things, isn't Jesus anymore, but it's like right doctrine and having the right beliefs and making sure that you don't fall into reading Aquinas or believing critical race theory. Like, the way to salvation is actually through works and orthopraxy and orthodoxy, right? Instead of, Jesus.
Maybe. I'm saying that, I will say, like, I feel like maybe a lot of people are culturally Christian and didn't realize it and discovered it when culture at large was calling them out for it. It's like, goes back to, I think, our first podcast where we talked about, like, do people actually read the Bible?
Yeah.
In other words, like, what would it mean for your worldview to actually be founded organically from the scriptures, from the bottom up? And I think what you discovered is it doesn't work. I think what other people have opted to do is presuppose that it is literal. So presuppose a sort of enlightenment, have enlightenment presuppositions about rationalism, and then that's the thing that they're really following. So that the Bible is actually more flexible for them than the belief that the Bible is literal. So all of a sudden it's like, wait, this prophecy or something that like 20 years ago I would have said doesn't apply. Now I realize it must apply.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see what you mean now. Yeah.
Like now I see that it's very literal, because what they're trying to do is maintain this view of Scripture, which is another way of saying their view of the world. Yeah, and
probably their identity as well.
And their identity, and what they've never done is the critical thinking of, what's it say?
So ironically, the people who I'm talking about aren't the average pew goers.
Yeah.
They're actually like pretty vocal, like seminary professors.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just saying the irony is like, these people who are leaders of a movement of some sort are the ones who were saying, like, also didn't spend the time introspecting and doing some critical thinking about what their foundational presuppositions are. So the very thing that they're attacking others about, like, how can you believe Aquinas? Don't you know that, that presupposes, Catholicism, which like is completely antithetical to the gospel in their opinion. They're not looking at their presuppositions that, this neo-fundamentalism is actually driving them more than the Bible they claim to hold in such high authority.
I guess what I'm saying is, and I don't disagree with that, but I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not insulting anybody's intelligence.
Right.
I think that really smart people, I think a lot of conspiracy theorists are really smart people. Some conspiracy theories are ingenious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
some actually end up being right.
It's not an indication of intelligence or ability, but it's a very particular and peculiar kind of skill to mine the Bible for certain truths. And once you're challenged on, say, this or that theology or this or that politic, to then immediately go back to the Bible and look at the verses to make it say essentially what I would say it doesn't say in order to justify your politics or your worldview, and then to the cognitive dissonance to not know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with people's intelligence,
right,
or their lack of studiousness. It's actually just the all they're doing is affirming their worldview all the time, and so their world just keeps getting smaller and smaller, and the amount of information that they receive, that they trust, keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Yeah, which I think is probably what defines fundamentalism.
Sure.
Right? In any sort of worldview. Right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, like the people, sorry if anybody's offended by this, like the people who go cycling through town with their masks on.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, even when this first began, I was not an anti-COVID conspiracy, whatever. And actually was following it. We got about 5 more minutes, so I'll try to make this brief. But Shirley had just given birth to my youngest son. And so, brand new mom, nursing, not sleeping. And her sole focus is on keeping this child alive. Now, I had done it 5 other times.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't concerned with keeping the child alive, but like I could think about other things.
Oh, this child. What's 1 in 6?
Yeah. I could think about other things. So I'm like reading about this thing in China. And then I have some friends in Seattle who actually were part of Mars Hill and also deconverted. Following them on Facebook. And they're like, guys, like Seattle's really bad. Like something is going on here and it's not the flu. And so I'm starting to follow this news and I'm like, babe, like a pandemic is coming. And she's like, the baby's not sleeping. I'm like, no, we have bigger problems, right? So, I called the schools closing. Like, I was at Amherst College at the time working, and I come in, I'm like, guys, we have 1 week till the schools close. My kids, I'm dropping them off at school, and I was like, say goodbye to everybody and get phone numbers because you won't see them again, right? And people at Amherst College were like, stop saying things, Nate. Anyway, all that to say, like, we believed in COVID, we believed in the masks. We're on the bike trail outside and people are wearing masks and we're not even, and I'm like, cause we're out, like, follow the science. And even now, just with the science, following the science is like, I have some very liberal friends who are like, I'm still wearing my mask outside. And I'm like, if you were yelling at, conservatives 2 years ago to follow the science, like, please be internally consistent and take your mask off.
Please be self-aware.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not inside if you're really nervous, but outside, like, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Again, not a scientist, or neither one of us are doctors or infectious disease experts. So please don't.
Yeah.
Don't sue us because you took our advice and got COVID.
Yeah, please.
Just a disclaimer there. But yeah, I mean, that's another type of fundamentalism, right?
Yeah.
Where they're not taking in new information as science presents it. And they're still stuck in, 2 years ago, I have to wear a mask everywhere.
I have a feeling this is what we're going to get the most emails about.
Maybe.
This last 5 minutes.
Also, I do believe conspiracy theorists or even fundamentalists can be incredibly intelligent. And maybe even more intelligent in some ways because to take in information that seems to contradict your worldview and make it fit your worldview.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
And it's a really good skill. And then when they argue for their position, like 98% of the stuff that they've worked out, you've never even considered.
Yeah.
So you just lose every debate,
right,
every time.
Yeah.
And that's like, that only bolsters their confidence that they're right. You're like, well, I never heard of that guy, that professor, like that guy that did then you discover like he has like 10 followers on WordPress.
Right. But that even confirms
and a PhD.
but even like that even confirms that he's more right or righteous because the mainstream media or the powers that be or whatever is suppressing his WordPress followers, right?
Right.
So Google, who's part of this like thing to take over the world, is not letting his thing get as many hits because they've like everything can confirm your worldview. Yeah. Wow. From mysticism to conspiracy theories, I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. I'll ask one more time since we went on a 10-minute tangent. Anything else to finish up with?
I love that that I basically just took the last 15 minutes to say, yes, mysticism, no conspiracy theories. There's a certain irony there that's amazing.
I actually think it all fits because conspiracy theories, fundamentalism, and reform theology, for me anyway, I can't speak of other people's reform theology, are all black and white thinking and very little mysticism involved. So probably all the same strain in some way or another. Well, we thank you guys for listening. Like, share, comment, can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, but there's nothing there yet.